All right, everybody. Hopefully, everybody's doing well today. And see who's all in here. Can everybody hear me okay? Can everybody hear me? I'm going to assume that everyone can hear me. If not, I'm sure somebody will let me know. Today, I've been trying to think of I have a billion different topics I would like to talk about, but one in particular that's kind of been stuck in my mind for a while. I say 3 or 4 weeks ago, I contacted another YouTuber. I'm not going to say who, but it don't really matter. And I was listening to Making a Murderer on TV again, and um, I got to the part where Pam Stern is calling in the RAB. You know, she calls Calumet to let them know that she found a RAB or whatever. And I noticed while listening, it was interesting, some of the dialogue. So I immediately went to StephenAveryCase.org and I pulled up the documents, the transcript of her phone call, and was even more interested in what I found. So some of this is not earth shattering to say the least. However, to me, it's very interesting. Now, keep in mind, thanks to Millbilly, she calls dispatch at 6 a.m. that morning, and roughly 4 hours later, she is standing next to the RAV. Now, there's many aspects to this that I want to cover, but we're going to start with some information that I've been researching. In 1954, all cars have been required to have a VIN number. Since 1981, they changed it to all cars have to have the same amount of digits, 17-digit number. Okay. To my knowledge, I've been researching like crazy. I haven't found any vehicles since 1981 that doesn't have a VIN number plate in the windshield of the of any vehicle, trucks, cars, SUVs. On the driver's side, on the dash, there's a VIN number on every car. If somebody knows of a car that was made since 1981 that doesn't have a VIN number on the dash, I would be very interested to know what type of car that is. But under the assumption, and to my knowledge, every car since 1981 has a VIN number on the driver's side dash. So keep that in mind, right? So I pulled up the document, the transcript, and she's talking to the dispatcher at first. Then she gets put on the phone with the sheriff, and then eventually gets put on the phone with Detective Wiegert. I'm not going to go through the entire transcript, but what I want to talk about are some key interesting points. Now, when I talked to this YouTuber weeks ago, I said, isn't it strange? Now, if you didn't know that Pam Stern was a private investigator at one point, or maybe was currently when she found the RAB, I'm not sure. But if you didn't know that she was a private investigator, then a lady not knowing where a VIN number on a vehicle is that's very possible. Even some men, some people just aren't familiar with that type of information. But the fact that she's a private investigator and the fact what I'm about to read to you proves she knows the easiest place to retrieve the VIN number on a vehicle. Now, it varies on different vehicles. Sometimes it's on the frame, sometimes it's in some cases it's in all of these places. It's on the frame and the door jamb, maybe on certain engine parts underneath the vehicle, but typically always on the dash, driver's side. Now, this little part of this transcript, I want to just start right in the middle of it because, like I said, I'm not going to go through the entire thing. Wiegert says, stay on the outside of the car, go over to the driver's side. Okay. She says, yeah, I realize that. I'm in the business, so I kind of know, but I can't find the VIN number. I'm picking up the wiper now. Okay. So this goes back to what I was explaining to my buddy, right? Now, keep in mind, I'm not reading this entire transcript. I'm sure every one of you watching has, obviously, probably. But in this conversation, she mentions, and it's not a very entirely long conversation, but in this conversation, she mentions VIN number 9 times. On face value, you might say, well, that doesn't really imply anything. But when you take into account that she is a private investigator, and she clearly says right here, Wiegert's telling her the easiest place to find the VIN number, because she previously asked, can I go in the vehicle? He says, no, whatever, don't touch the vehicle. He says, stay on the outside of the car, go over to the driver's side. She says, yeah, I realize that. I'm in the business, so I kind of know, but I can't find the VIN number. I'm picking up the wiper now. I'm going to read it one more time. Wiegert says, stand on the outside of the car. I mean, obviously, she's going to be standing on the outside of the car. Go over to the driver's side. Pam says, yeah, I realize that. Okay, so she is acknowledging that she knows where the VIN number is. She knows where the easiest place to find the VIN number is. Yeah, I realize that. I'm in the business, which I take to be she's a private investigator. She should know and does know the easiest place to find the VIN number. So then she goes on to say, so I kind of know, but I can't find the VIN number. I'm picking up the wiper. So in this conversation, she mentions VIN number 9 times. To me, it sounds very awkward. It sounds very, I don't want to say scripted because I don't think that's the right term. I don't think that this was all wrote out on paper and scripted and she read it. However, I find it very odd. And on Making a Murderer, when you're listening to it, they don't give you the entire conversation. But even then, when I was listening to it, I found it very odd how the conversation started to unfold. And then once I dove in, because Gilters, I've been reading case files for months, but I probably, at the rate that I read, it'd probably take me a couple more years before I get done with them. But I immediately went to this document and I started reading. And guilters always say, well, read the case files because that's what's going to change your mind. Everything I have read thus far only emboldens my beliefs that something isn't right with this entire thing. Now, a lot of people has had concerns about Pam. They have had concerns about how fast she found the car. I watched a video. I don't know who put it out, but I watched a video of a lady that went to Avery's salvage yard, and she takes the same exact path that Pam and her daughter would have took that day when they were searching for the RAB. Now, if you don't stop to look at anything and you just walk straight there, believe it or not, it's a pretty long walk. I don't know the exact distance, but just watching her video, I know it took her like 7 minutes to get there, just watching her walk all the way to where the RAB was parked. So it's no secret that it took her anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes, I would say max 30 minutes to find the RAB. Now, as we all have, and we've seen all of the cars on this property, the route that she took to get to the RAB has, I would say, 200 cars, 300 cars down, along that road going towards the little pond. How is it if it takes you, let's just say 7 minutes to walk from the entrance to where the pond's at? If it takes you 7 minutes to walk there, that means, and I guess we'll just say 30 minutes. That means in 23 minutes, they searched all of those cars that's on the way to where the RAB was found. And then instead of going anywhere else on this 40-acre lot, she goes right to where the RAB is at. In my opinion, as others have mentioned many a times, even Stephen's lawyers, they said something is up with Pam Stern. Something didn't sit right with them, with their testimony, with the evidence that they was looking at, probably the exact same thing that I'm looking at right now. Something doesn't sit right. A private investigator knows where the VIN number is at on a car. Most people know the easiest place to find the VIN number. You're not going to, if you look at the height between the tire and the fender well of a RAV4, you're not going to be crawling under there, trying to stick your head in there and find a VIN number. You shouldn't be trying to open the door to look for the VIN number. This car is probably 8 inches off the ground. So, I mean, if you are aware that the VIN number is on the dash, that is the most obvious place to go. It's straight to the dash and read the VIN number. The other day, I said, this conversation is so strange that I have a hard time believing that this wasn't 100% false. Like, I really don't know how to explain it. I don't have the words to exactly say what I want to say, but I believe she knew where the RAB was when she went there. I believe she knew where the RAB was. I think she knew exactly that it was on Avery Salvage Yard and exactly where it was on Avery Salvage Yard. I mean, if Stephen Avery was the last place Teresa Halbach had visited, to me, it would seem more logical to have start closer to his house. I mean, I could be wrong, but to me, I would have started looking around his house, not the furthest corner from his house. So, I want to know what the deal is. Now, other people have said, and I'm not stating one way or the other, I'm not stating that I believe there's 2 Ravs or 3 Ravs or 20 Ravs. I don't care, and I personally don't think that comes into play in this case. I don't think it's 2 different Ravs. I think it's a lighting issue when it hits the paint. However, there are a bunch of people that do believe there are 2 different Ravs. Now, what's interesting in that conversation is, and it kind of stood out to me, was she also mentioned many a times in this transcript that she said, she asked them what color it was. They come back eventually and say it's supposed to be a dark green color. And this could just be, maybe they thought it was green. They didn't know that it was like a turquoise blue or whatever. So I'm not implying anything. But I did think it was interesting that she mentioned quite a few times. I want to say three times that the Rav that she's standing there looking at looks more blue than green. So that's interesting. I mean, obviously, that doesn't prove anything. I'm pretty sure that was her car. Judging by photos of her standing by it that we have seen and other photos, pretty sure that's the same car. But I just thought that was an interesting note that I took out of that conversation. Another interesting thing, and I asked somebody about this, and they informed me that it could have been just maybe they didn't hear her correctly when she was calling out the VIN number. Because the VIN number is actually JT3HP 10V5X7113044. That's the VIN number. But when in the transcript, they have a couple of the letters wrote wrong. That could just be, they misheard what she said. Some of the letters might have sounded alike. But particularly the V, HP10V5X, the V in the transcript they had wrote down as a Z. Now, personally, I don't see how you get those two confused. Whether, she said it wrong. I find it highly unlikely that they thought it looked like a Z, because a Z and a V looks nothing alike. So whether or not the dispatch or whoever is generating this transcript, whether they thought she said that or not, it's undeniable fact, according to their document, that they had a different VIN number wrote down in the transcript from what was actually on the RAV. And maybe that's where people get some of their speculation from. But stuff like that, I try not to read too deep into, because some of that could easily be explained. And I think there's too much other important items that we could talk about than the nitpick on little stuff like that. So some other information that I thought was interesting so far, and like I said, this isn't this wasn't a planned video necessarily. I wanted to do one. I just couldn't really come up with one topic that I wanted to talk about. Some other documents and stuff that I read through and things that I thought was interesting was somebody let me know, first of all, before I get too deep into this, I have seen nothing, any transcripts of interviews with Bobby Dassey in the case files. If there are some, not that I'm implying anything, I'm interested to read all of the interviews. So if there are interview transcripts of Bobby Dassey by the police, if one of y'all could point me to them, then that would be great. I noticed when the police interviewed Blaine, he said something that was interesting, and then it kind of jogged my thought process. He said that the burn barrels behind his house are not used by anyone except them, meaning the boys, Barb, and whoever the heck the other guy was living there. The Yondas, okay? All of them in that double wide, nobody uses those barrels except them. They even asked him, I believe, has Stephen ever used any of y'all's barrel? He said, no, nobody uses ours. He has his own, which is right there in his front yard, literally right by the driveway. So the reason why I think that's interesting is because then I've thought about this before, but it made me think about this in a different light after I read Blaine say this in this conversation, because I've often had the same thought. I've said, well, if Stephen has his own burn barrel, first of all, why, let's just hypothetically speak, because everybody knows I think they're innocent, 100%. So, but I want to hypothetically speak. If if Stephen Avery killed Teresa Halbach, why would he burn her phone and other items in the front yard burn barrel right beside the driveway? To me, from the very jump, that has made absolutely no sense. I cannot wrap my head around that thought. Okay. To go even further, if he has his own burn barrel, why would he need their burn barrel? Why wouldn't he just use his own burn barrel? It seems like he would draw attention to himself if he's going behind his sister's house, taking their burn barrel. Okay. Furthermore, to elaborate on that even further, some of the thoughts that came through my mind was, why do you even need to put anything in a burn barrel? If you supposedly are burning her on this pit, and you keep fueling this fire until every possible bit of tissue and everything that you can burn is completely burned up, what is the point of putting anything in the burn barrel? I mean, if he crushed the bones up, and let's just hypothetically speak and say he wanted to take them off away from his house, you wouldn't use a humongous 55-gallon burn barrel to do that. You could fit if you chopped them up, you could literally fit all of those bones in a 5-gallon bucket or something else. So that's always struck me odd, as when they found bones in her burn barrel, in Barb's backyard burn barrel, one of hers, unless there's something I'm missing, that strikes me very odd. He has his own burn barrel. Another thing I thought was interesting, Scott Taddick was interviewed 3 different occasions so far from what I've read. And I thought his stories and his version of events was very interesting. Scott claims in one of his interviews, and this isn't verbatim, I'm not sitting here looking at the transcript, I just got notes wrote down. But Scott claims the first time that once he gets done hunting, I believe, he goes to Barb's and Stephen, Barb, and one of her son is standing outside when he pulls up. I don't know if it's by the fire. I don't know. I don't know if it's by closer to her house, but that's what he says in the transcript. Okay. Then in another statement, he says he pulls up. He sees one of her sons and Stephen Avery standing by the fire, and Barb comes out of her house once he gets there. And at that time, he says the flames were only about 3 feet high. Now, keep in mind, the soonest statement that he gives would be more accurate in his memory than the furthest one, obviously, right? It wasn't until his last interview, if I'm not mistaken, this is when the flames, went from 3 feet to 10 feet over the top of the garage. And the investigators asked him, they said, well, did you smell anything strange burning? And he said no. So, inconsistencies in his statements, regardless of the reason, regardless if you think he had anything to do with it, regardless if you think he was just, for whatever reason, trying to make it sound worse on Stephen Avery than what it was, or whether you think he just simply, it had been so long that he just simply kind of forgot some of the facts that he's seen. But regardless, he has inconsistencies in his statement. Another interesting note. Now, I'm not sitting here throwing stones at anybody. When I'm reading through the case files, I make notes and I find things that's interesting. If you remember, when the cops came to Stephen Avery's house, he let them go through his house. Okay. Now, if that's me or you, I see that happening. I say, well, yeah, sure. I don't have anything to hide. You can come in here and look at whatever you want. But Stephen Avery had every right to be like, hold on a second. I'm in the process of suing y'all. Y'all basically 100% knew I was innocent. And y'all had me locked up for 18 years. I don't have anything to hide, but I would appreciate it if you get a search warrant. He didn't do that, but he had every right to be concerned about these officers being inside his house, but he didn't do that. He let them walk and look through his house. So, sorry about that, guys. No problem, right? Well, Chuck, and I'm not saying Chuck did anything. I'm just stating interesting facts. He tells Manitowoc that nobody better be in his house or heads are going to roll when he gets back. That's his exact words. And then the dispatch, I believe, or whoever answered the phone, says, well, you're going to have to talk to Calumet about that because they're the ones doing the investigation or whatever. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, well, I get it. You don't want these people in your house, but Stephen was more than willing. Now, you got to think about it. If you just murdered somebody and the cops roll up at your house, first of all, he had excellent body language. Okay. And he's making eye contact with the people that's asking him questions. He's not, he doesn't appear to be nervous. He's very calm. He seems, which doesn't mean anything, seems to be honest, telling the truth. Colburn, on one occasion when he goes over there, he states on the stand he doesn't notice a cut on Stephen Avery's finger. Another interesting fact. One thing I forgot about throughout this entire journey was Steve made the comment that he went in his house on one particular occasion and smelled cigarette smoke. Stephen Avery doesn't smoke. To all the non-smokers out there, if you do not smoke, then you can smell cigarette smoke very easily. To smokers like myself, I smoke, unfortunately. It's not as easy for us to smell what non-smokers smell. I thought that was interesting. And I remember that being said. I remember that being brought up. But I thought that was very interesting because that's very specific. That's not something that's like an excuse or like something that you just come up with off the top of your head. I mean, that's a very specific claim that on whatever occasion, I don't remember the exact occasion, he said that when he went in his house, it smelled like cigarette smoke. So he's saying that somebody was in his house smoking a cigarette. So the more I read through all of this, it does nothing but confirm what I already believe. Now, I don't know if Stephen Avery is going to get a new trial. I don't know if, what's going to happen. I know yesterday the state filed for another extension, and they are waiting for the response from the appellate courts. I was just reading something. So they're waiting on the response from the appellate courts. If Kathleen Zellner at some point, I don't want to go through right now what it would take to get there. That's irrelevant. What I want to talk about is if Kathleen Zellner gets in front of judges in any fashion, whether it be a new trial, whether it be an evidentiary hearing, whatever. If she opens this case up and she is able to start tearing this evidence apart, hopefully, if he gets a new trial, it'll be televised. I think that would be absolutely incredible if they would televise that trial. I mean, the ratings would be phenomenal. I mean, I would watch every second of it, intently, because I would want to hear every single word that was stated in that trial. But things that, Zellner, if she is able to get in front of judges, she needs to tear them apart. Now, she's an awesome attorney. I think she is obviously very good. I don't quite like her tone, how she comes off. Like I've watched her a little bit in court in the Dream Killer documentary, and she did good, no doubt. She got the dude out of prison. He didn't, he was innocent. But just listening to her tone in the courtroom, I didn't really care for it too much. I think she should have a tone more like Brendan Dassey's lawyer when he got up and was telling the judge and the jury that all of this evidence in here, he kind of had like a swagger, I guess you could call it. And he's like, all this evidence in here, don't none of it tie to my client. So I think she needs to be a little more aggressive if she does get in front of some judges. But things that would make a difference if this happens is if she can call, and I'm sure she will. I don't know about, somebody would have to tell me. I don't know if you can call expert witnesses in an evidentiary hearing. I'm not sure. Seems like you would be able to. I mean, that's the whole purpose. I just haven't researched that. But regardless, she's going to call all the right experts this time. And that was a big fail by Buting and Strang in Stephen Avery's trial. I can't wrap my mind around. I mean, I don't know how much a ballistics expert or these DNA experts and forensic anthropologists and blood spatter experts, I don't know how much these people cost to get them on stand. But I cannot wrap my mind around why people like this were not called. I know they called a few of them. They called one lady to try to give a rebuttal to the EDTA argument. And I thought she did a good job, but I didn't like her delivery. But I guess that's irrelevant. But the bullet, the key pieces of evidence that she needs to call expert witnesses on is the bullet, the key, the movement of the bones, and the blood spatter, or lack thereof. Blood evidence in general. Blood in the RAV. I don't see a possible outcome short of a new trial if she is able to get in front of these judges with the evidence. I mean, especially with expert witnesses. They're going to tear this entire case apart. Just like Strang and Butin, they tried to do, and they did a good job in certain areas. I don't want to knock them because just outside looking in, only being able to witness the parts that you're able to witness by watching the show, I thought they did a good job in a lot of different areas. But the lack of expert witnesses, I mean, you can't just cross-examine the state witnesses and think that you're going to get anywhere. Although they did do pretty good in the cross-examination of the state's witnesses, made a couple of them look like they was morons. But these experts are hired, whether it be by the state or the defense, they're hired. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they lie, but they can tell the truth that they want to tell. They can spin it how they want to spin it. And they're not going to concede damaging information to the prosecution. So that's why it's important that the defense called their own witnesses to refute some of these things that the state is trying to claim. The bullet, and that's a problem that I run into a lot. I run into a problem where, is it me or am I missing something or what? Because I can't really find what the state is claiming. Like when they present item FL, for instance, to my knowledge, all they claim is Stephen Avery shot Teresa Halbach. this bullet fragment had Teresa Halbach's DNA. They don't go into any detail about, okay, well, you're presenting skull fragments claiming that this is a entrance wound of a 22 caliber long rifle bullet. And you're saying that he shot her, and you're saying this bullet has her DNA on it, implying that this bullet was shot through her. So to me, that means you think this bullet went through her head. And item FL 100% did not go through Teresa Halbach's head. Any expert witnesses, I've talked to some, I've made videos about some of this. They work for universities and different places, so they won't, they can't come on my channel to sit here and talk about this. But I have email conversations with these people, and they come to the same conclusions that I do. That bullet, item FL, was not shot through her head. Clearly, in season 2, when they show you the wood and the cotton fibers, or potentially, I think it could very well be insulation fibers embedded in it with the wood. Regardless, that bullet was shot through the wall of Stephen Avery's garage. It never went through Teresa Halbach. So then it begs the question, how did the DNA get on to the bullet? And I think we pretty much know how the DNA got on the bullet. It's not hard. That's one thing that, when you're talking to people about this, it's not hard to relabel something or to manipulate evidence when you have all of it at your disposal. You have her DNA. You have the items. It's not hard to manipulate some of these things, because to me, I don't think the crime lab is the problem. I think they can only test what's given to them. So yeah, I mean, if let's just say that DNA was on the bullet, crime lab says, yeah, Teresa Halbach's DNA is on this bullet, but that doesn't mean anything. That only means something in the sense that you are assuming that the evidence is unbiased and that it was not manipulated in any fashion. Another point that she should be able to completely discredit is the key. Now, the fact that the key was not found in his trailer on multiple previous searches, and then all of a sudden it's found, and supposedly it falls out of the back of this bookcase, hangs a left turn, and flops over under some slippers. And Lieutenant Link says something to the effect of, there's a key there. Well, the key has no wear marks on the key. Okay? Now, if the state wants to, like they have, refute that and say, well, that was her spare key. She lost her keys and her sister bought her this lanyard, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The key should at least have her DNA on the key in those cracks and crevices. The DNA expert that I spoke with, he said on such a key, you would more likely find only the owner of the key's DNA or a mixture. Now, people have said, well, he cleaned the key off with bleach. It don't make any sense. This whole thing, you can't. Why would he clean the key off to turn around and put his DNA on the key? Why would he hide the key in his room and let the cops go rummaging through there? If the key was there the entire time, that bookcase has already been searched on a previous occasion and nothing was found. And then Colburn gets up there and says, I'll be the first to admit I was rather rough with it. I twisted it and turned it and pulled it, yet nothing on top of the bookcase is disturbed. The remote is still sitting there. There's loose change still sitting there. there's speculation by an individual, and I forgot his name, but there's speculation that the bullet fragment itself is sitting there. The one that they, if you zoom in on that bookcase, it looks very similar to the bullet fragment item FL that's sitting right there on the bookcase, on the bookshelf. So that's another interesting aspect. The movement of the bones, real quick before we wrap up in a minute. The blood spatter, whatever the heck you want to call it. The lack thereof in the garage. I've spoke about this at length. It gets my blood pressure going because if you have the audacity to try to convince me that Stephen Avery has the capabilities, and I don't care if you want to claim, which I'm not aware that they did claim this, but if you want to claim that Stephen Avery covered the body up, whatever, even if he did that, you are still going to have some form of fashion, unless he wrapped her up like a cocoon or something, you're going to have some form of blood that's going to be on the concrete. You're going to have blood spatter forward and backwards. The expert that I spoke to said that you would most likely find the back splatter that comes back towards the shooter. That would be on the gun. It would be on Stephen Avery's clothes. It would be the forward spatter would be, especially with that low of a caliber, would be such a fine mist. And if you look at pictures of the garage with all of these different items, and you try to convince me that Stephen Avery was able to clean all of this up, or to go even further, you try to convince me that CSI rolls up in this garage and they don't find any of the blood, I'm not buying it. I never have. Every piece of forensic evidence makes absolutely no sense to me. Almost anything you want to talk about as far as forensics, it doesn't add up. That is what got me interested in this case. Yes, I don't want to see an innocent person in prison. I feel bad that somebody lost their daughter, all of that. But I want the right person to go to prison for the crime. And when you bring all of these different items to court and convict two people that a lot of people believe are innocent, that's like a slap in the face. You can't even get your evidence to match up with what's coming out of your mouth. And it's just like the bones. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the bones, but it boils down to this. The bones are found in so many different locations that no matter how you want to say it, no matter if you think Stephen Avery is guilty, no matter if you think he's innocent, no matter what theory you want to use to how he carried it out, if you think that he's guilty, it would not make sense for there to be bones in his burn pit, in the grass, in a burn barrel behind Barb's house. And then I recently read just today that there was 5 different other spots. I thought there was only 3, but there was 5 different other spots in the quarry, and I want to say 2 or 3 spots on Manasquat County's property. So even if you want to try to utter the statement that, well, he took the bones out of his pit and he dispersed them, whatever. If you're trying to hide what you have supposedly done, wouldn't it make more sense to get all of the bones, take them out in the yard, bring a shovel with you? There's one laying right beside the burn pit. Dig right beside one of these old cars. All you would have to do is take all of these bones, dig a hole, put all the bones in it, cover it up, try to make the ground look like it has not been disturbed. Take the key or put everything in the freaking car and drive it off your property. At least make an attempt. I mean, you could have drove it across the track and parked it down Cuss Road or something in the woods. I mean, at least make an attempt to get rid of the evidence. And to me, that's why this is so fascinating, because you're saying that Stephen Avery is smart, is one of the smartest people in the world in some cases, that he's able to clean so well all of the forensic evidence of this case. But yet, at the same time, he's stupid enough to leave all of this evidence how it was supposedly found. And that, in a nutshell, is what fascinates me about this. It's the inconsistencies. If they had somebody lay this case out to where it matched all of the forensic evidence, a lot of people might not even be sitting here having this conversation. But they messed up. And I firmly believe and hope that it's going to come out. I mean, could you imagine the crap storm that's going to rain down in Wisconsin if Kathleen Zellner goes in there and proves that Stephen Avery is, and Brendan, she can't prove that he's innocent, but in a sense, if she can prove that Stephen Avery is innocent, without a doubt, in a sense, it does the same thing for Brendan Dassey, even though he would have a little bit different road to go down. I mean, could you imagine? It's going to be absolutely phenomenal if that day ever happens. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. It takes time. All of it takes time. These people don't get in a hurry to do anything, and that's what's sad about it. Same thing in his first case. They did not get in a hurry. You know, and I firmly believe that it was on purpose. They didn't want Stephen Avery getting out of prison. But that's going to be all for this live video. I appreciate everybody that came and joined me for this discussion. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do. If you haven't subscribed to File Plays YouTube channel, make sure you do. Miss Linda K Listening's channel, make sure you do. And honorable mentions, Mr. Paul Capaldi and Eric Jose, they gave me some shout outs the other day, so I want to return that favor. And I appreciate everybody that came. Make sure you like this video. As Miss Linda says, leave some touch DNA on the like button. The other day when I seen that, I like to fell out of my chair. That was absolutely hilarious. But thank y'all for joining in the conversation, and I appreciate each and every one of you.